Good evening, and thank you for coming out here tonight for this presentation. We're going to get started here in about 2 minutes. Just some meeting logistics. We'll start right about 6 o'clock. All participants will be muted unless we unmute at some point in time for open questions. Just helps with the presentation and don't hear barking dogs and different things like that. We will have time for asking questions. If you'd like to pose a question, you can go into the chat box feature, put a question in there, and then there will be several times throughout the presentation tonight that we'll be answering questions about different things. Afterwards, if you have additional questions or want to discuss something, you're welcome to reach out to me via phone, text, email. Happy to talk about any of the concepts that we're going to be talking about. We will get started here in about a minute. Good evening, and thank you for coming out here tonight. Again, we're going to get started with our presentation. Everybody is on mute at this point in time so that we can go through the presentation. If you have questions throughout the time, you're welcome at any point in time to ask your questions in the chat room, and we'll get to those questions at the appropriate times of the presentation, but definitely at the end as well. We are recording this presentation. I did hit the start button, so it is recording this time. And so I will work tomorrow to get that up on YouTube on our so that people can access it either on Facebook or website or different places like that. We'll make sure it's available to you. So let us begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many gifts you've brought into us in our lives. Help us, even in these difficult times, to see you working in our lives and working through us and working through others. Give us the strength we need in this time. Give us the perseverance we need. Help us always see you in all that we do. We ask you to bless us this day. Give us the graces we need. We hold up all those people that need our prayers, all the prayers that have been asked of us, all those prayers we hold in the silence of the heart we bring to you today. Answer them according to your divine wisdom. We ask all this through your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Tonight we're going to be talking about planning for the start of the school year for 2020-21 in light that we are in a world with COVID-19 and social distancing and a lot of new vocabulary that probably did not exist 6 months ago. As we talk tonight, we're going to go through a couple different topics, but first and foremost, I'd like to thank a group of teachers and faculty and staff that have been meeting twice a week, every week for several weeks now, trying to say how can we be adequately prepared for next year. I also want to thank all those parents who participated in our focus groups. That information from those focus groups was very helpful in understanding and guiding our discussion today. Our agenda is I'm going to talk about some of the guiding principles that we have been and will be working with as we look at the beginning of the next school year. I want to answer the question, who will decide what we do? And then look at what are we planning for. I've said to people, it's almost like we're 3/4 of the way through a football season. We know we're going to the Super Bowl, but we don't know what team we're playing for, and we're preparing different game plans for different scenarios. And so there's 3 scenarios that we're planning for: an open campus, which is our hope and what we're shooting for, remote learning, and a hybrid models. And then we'll have a chance to ask any questions that you might answer, any questions that you might have. Again, don't wait till the end. If it was me, I'd forget the questions by the end. You can put the questions at any time in the chat room and we'll try to get to them. So let's talk about guiding principles. What is going to guide our work and everything? And so the first and foremost you need to know is that we are planning to resume campus life in August of 2020. That is our goal. That's what we're trying to do. And we will do everything in order to make sure that happens from our stand side. At the same point in time, we are being prepared for all the other possibilities. So in our guiding principles, the first and foremost, we're going to be aggressive and safe in reopening our campus. We're going to open as soon as we can. And in opening, we're going to make sure that we're safe in how we do things. The other thing that has guided all the work that you'll see here tonight is our mission, vision, and values. And so our mission as being a ministry of Assumption Parish, OLA Catholic School Community continues to evangelize the evangelization of the Catholic Church by taking responsibility for forming saints, educational excellence, and demonstrating Christ-like behavior. And we'll be fulfilling these values as we do it. And so academic rigor, excellence, different pieces like that have all played into all the work that we're doing here. We will be consistent. We're going to try to provide consistency in what we do. It is unclear as to what will happen, but a lot of the things that we plan for is if we have to go in and out of learning from in the school or out of the school, that can we provide that consistency between both environments? We need the ability to pivot and change on a dime, ability to react and respond to the different demands that are going on either from the government or in our community. Also need to realize this is temporary. At some point, coronavirus is going to go away and we're going to be able to continue life in a lot of the ways that we had before. I really believe that. So this is a temporary, and how do we move through this so that after this is all over, our school, our community, our family is still intact and thriving. We want to be prepared for everything. And this is the old Boy Scout coming out of me, being prepared for whatever might have you. And my backpack may weigh a lot, but we're going to have whatever we need within it. Finally, whenever possible, we're going to be flexible and have options for family. And I think you'll see that in the work we're doing. So these are kind of the guiding principles of what we're trying to do. Who will decide? So ultimately, it is the governor's orders and the Archbishop's guidance as to deciding when and how we will be opening our campus. We have to do everything in a legal way, but we have to follow what those two individuals with their wisdom and guidance are directing us to do. As a principals group and as a diocese, there are two committees that are in place right now. Actually, one of them just finished up. I chaired the committee on developing a response plan on how the diocese and how schools will respond if there is an outbreak of the COVID-19 in a school site. And so we've been working for about 2 months now, a group of principals and counselors, as to how to put a response together and support a school. And we've finished up our recommendation today and gave that to the principals. There's another committee that I'm not on that is working on providing recommendations on protocols on how to reopen a school. We got briefed on this today by the superintendent, and that group is going to look at really broad guiding principles. But ultimately, it is going to be Father Dome, our pastor, and myself as the principal that will be planning the reopening of our school legally within the guidance given from the Archbishop and from the governor, and safely looking at all the different pieces out there and using these guidelines within it. So we have to do what the governor says, we have to do what the Archbishop says, but once we have that framework that we can work within, we'll be moving as aggressively and as safely as we possibly can. What are we planning for? We're planning to start the school year, in several different ways. Our ideal is, again, to work with opening the school with adaptations. There also could be, at times, remote learning, either at the start of the school year or within the school year. Several agencies are predicting that we might have a lull in August, but things when the flu season hits up again, there might be another outbreak. So we're also planning for what will remote learning look like. And I'll talk a lot about that aspect, and it will look very different than it did this current year. And finally, a hybrid model of going in between those two different pieces and what that might look like. So I'll take a moment now to talk about in-school learning with adaptations, and that's what our goal is. That's what we're hoping will happen, and that's what we're preparing for. And we're doing work to make sure that we're ready to open our doors in early August as scheduled. We're learning from a lot of different people and looking at examples of what other schools are doing, both in our country and around the world, acknowledging that there are still many unknowns about this virus and what we need to do. We're also looking to the Centers for Disease Control, and this week they actually put out some really good guidance on for schools on how to open and what things should we be looking at. Now, this is not required legislation or anything like that, but it's a beautiful flow chart that helps us think about what do we need to put in place in order to have our school open. And so looking at these different factors in here of how do we protect higher risk people, how do we screen people as they're coming onto our campus, what are the health and hygiene practices we need to look at, both within the school day and then also cleaning the facility on a nightly basis and preparing for those. There's a lot of different things we're looking at as we prepare for all those unknowns. We're already in the process of buying infrared thermometers so that if the recommendation is there and necessity is there, we can take temperatures of students as they're coming on the campus. We're looking at our policies. Do we need to limit the items that are brought onto the campus so that we don't have the transfer of things? Do we need to limit people on campus? And one policy I know that is being looked at the diocese level as a recommendation is, do we, for pickup and drop off, do we only have kids coming on and off the campus at that point in time? And do we do all the pickups and drop offs from one or two locations so that we don't have adults, grandparents, and all that on the campus while we're having this outbreak? So looking at our policies, again, none of this has been decided, and we're waiting for the committee at the Archdiocese to give us guidance, but also for some guidance from the Archbishop and from the governor. Class space, we're currently have been aggressively working on cleaning the rooms. Once the rooms are clean, I'm going to be taking an audit of all the different rooms and how many desks and in what configurations can we fit kids in the classrooms with providing the appropriate distance between them, and how do we make those distances? There's several different models that we're looking at. Do we put tape on the ground to make sure that the desks stay in these places? And also, do we remove unnecessary furniture, things that are nice in a classroom but aren't absolutely necessary on a day-to-day basis, so that we can provide greater distance between kids and between the adults? Additional sanitation processes, bringing in the possibilities of bringing in a company on a regular basis to sanitize the school, hiring additional maintenance staff so that every night we're doing appropriate sanitation, already looking at budget and making some adjustments so that we can have that extra maintenance in place. Lunch, looking at some different things. Is it necessary that we take away the microwaves as an area where this can spread? We need a little bit more research on that piece. Do we need to put more tables into the lunchroom so that we can spread the students out? Hand washing practices. There's limited areas in our school where we have hot water coming out of the faucets. Do we need to get mini hot water heaters to put in so that we have more hot water locations where kids can appropriately and adults can appropriately wash their hands? Or do we also have sanitation stations where through the gels they can sanitize their hands? What is going to be the use of masks? Are we going to require kids to use masks? That's where we're looking at some guidance. We're also preparing to have masks and looking at possible vendors. Do we have a uniform mask, or do we allow for that individuality? And so these are all things that we're exploring and looking at. One question I have is, how in the world do you keep a mask on a 4-year-old child? I even have a problem keeping my own mask on. So the developmental issues of social distancing, having 15 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds in a classroom, and how do we make sure they stay at social distance and stay safe, and what is that going to look like, and what are the boundaries we're going to put in place? Looking at what are our policies when and if there is a vaccine. There's a lot of controversies or questions about the possible vaccines that they're looking at, and do we require the vaccines just like we require the vaccines for other infections? School supplies, we need to look at making sure that we're not sharing supplies, that we have kids having their own supplies and their own desks so that things aren't moving around as much. And how do we work with the playground equipment, basketballs, all those different pieces like that. So a lot of issues that we're working on. And right now we have a lot of unknowns. We don't want to be reacting in a haphazard way. And so we need to be really looking at what does the research, what does the science tell us? There's a lot of states that are making judgments and decisions that aren't necessarily being supported by science. And so how do we, if we decide not to have microwaves, is it the science there that tells us that that's an area that could be a possible area for the spread of the disease? So these are all things that we'll be working on and researching throughout the summer. I want to talk and probably spend most of the time talking about the remote learning model because we will be prepared if we have to go into some kind of remote learning, and it will look very, very different than it did this year in a lot of different ways. So let me share some of this model with you. We can't develop the model that has 5 different features that we're looking at, and we'll look at each one of these different features: values and expectations, the framework, the platform, the design, and the resources that we'll need for it. We started by looking at what are the values we need to have, and again, this is a good area where the focus groups with parents was coming into place, because one of the things that parents said is, with me working and with my child being at home, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning may not work for me to help supporting them in their learning. And as independent as we can make it, a 7-year-old and 8-year-old will still need support in accessing things and staying on task. And so it really came evident from talking to the parents that we needed to have flexibility in place so that kids can access the learning at whatever time they needed to. So that's just one example. So values, 4 values that we're going to be guiding us in if we need to do remote learning. Again, the hope is that we don't have to go in this way. First of all, that there's daily engagement. Teachers will be expected to be engaged for a standard workday on all calendar days, and students will be expected to log in on a daily basis on all school days. Rigor. The instruction will be related to standards, and we're already working on identifying what those essential standards are and having them articulated in the lesson design for the students. Expectations that all teachers adopt the school adopted remote learning model, that we're going to be united on this, and we've already talked about this as a staff. Expectations that all students engage and perform at a high level, and expectations for online behavior and training students on how do you handle yourself in a Zoom classroom. We're going to use blended synchronization. There's a term out there that talks about distant learning, remote learning being asynchronistic, meaning that you're really not engaging with the teacher at all, or synchronistic, where everybody's engaging in the classroom at the same time. We're going to be using a blended model, and you'll see this more as we talk about the framework, but we're going to use Zoom calls for small group lessons and support. We're going to use recorded video for whole group lesson and instruction, providing parents with that flexibility they need. And then daily office hours to provide support to individual kids. And we'll talk about that, have a whole slide on that later in the presentation. This plan also gives us the ability to pivot and move between the school and remote learning with minimal to no disruption. And I think you'll see that as we go through this process of this presentation. So what is the framework? Looked at a lot of different models across the country and at different Catholic schools, and really a model that helped parents out with the flexibility, helped the teachers out in the learning, is to have a model where on for the elementary, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, they're engaged in the learning around all the core subject areas. Wednesday then is the day where they have their electives. My daughter's school is using this model. They're doing their electives on the Fridays, but it really is helpful, both the families and the teachers having the 4 days in the core with the electives being on that one day, so that you can manage the workload a little bit better and it flows a little bit better. For the middle school kids, that routine of everything every day really works well. And so The kids will have their core subject areas and then one elective every day for a 6-week period of time, as we talked about in the strategic plan. We looked at what should be the targeted amount of time for contact with teacher. I really believe it is important that kids see their teacher's face and hear their teacher's voice. We can find videos of this person from over across in Baltimore, Maryland, giving a presentation on a topic, but a teacher knows their kids best, and kids need to hear and see their teacher. And so in the junior and kindergarten level, they're looking at 30 to 60 minutes a day of contact time with their teacher, 10 to 20 minutes of English language arts, 10 to 20 minutes of math, 5 to 10 minutes of social studies, 5 to 10 minutes of religion. These are videos that are produced by the teacher that the kids can watch. They don't have to be necessarily on at 8 o'clock. If that 8 o'clock schedule works for you and that routine, then it would be in that way. But all these times for that would be on a video basis. There would be then on a daily basis, you have the lesson presented by the teacher and then 1 to 2 practice activities for each content area. And then we would have 2 to 3 Zoom calls a week in the areas of language arts and mathematics, where the teachers would be working with small groups of kids at the ability level of those kids. So 5 to 6 kids in a Zoom call with the teacher working on targeted math and or reading skills that are needed for the students. And then weekly or bi-weekly assessments and making sure that we're checking on the progress of the students. You can see as we go up in the ages with first and second graders, this time of interacting with the video and with the teachers starts going up and increases even much more as we get into the middle school level. The essential framework remains the same, and you'll see that here. The routine for learning remotely, video presented by the teacher, independent practice activities to gain that confidence in it, small group support 2 to 3 times a week focused on English and math with live recordings available to those in case kids can't make it at that time. And then office hours to provide that specific questions to those teachers and direct support to the students, followed by assessment. Did the kids learn it or not? And do we have to go back with it? So talking about the office hours, that would be very different than this year. They would be strategically scattered throughout the afternoon so that they're not overlapping as best we can. There's no way to get them all in and have none of them overlapping, but doing it strategically, as we know we have kids in multiple grade levels in multiple classrooms. There's no planned activities or lessons during these office hours. This is a time for a child or a student to get on and say, hey, I don't understand 2-column addition. Can you help me as the teacher? And providing that direct support. So the teacher will be there, be online. Student comes on in, says, I need help in this area, or I need to talk to my teacher. Parent can say the same thing. They get the help they need and they leave. And I guess so it is only utilized for the additional help. Going back into this model, that small group interaction time is where the teacher 2 to 3 times a week will have a scheduled time with the student to provide that support and differentiated instruction to the child. We need to make sure that we have community within all this. Going and having daily attendance. When the child logs in, they go into a Google form, they say, I'm logging in for the day, and then we can take attendance. We'll be producing daily videos with a morning routine, or a start of the day routine, I guess we should say more so, with a prayer on it, pledge, announcements, most likely coming from my office. Wednesday liturgy, whether that's Mass or a liturgy of the Word, Mass offered by Father, or if need be, I can do the liturgy of the Word. Friday devotion, weekly class meetings once a week that are voluntary and scheduled, and then special days. So let me move on to the next piece of our framework. We talked about the values, we talked about the framework. Now, what is the platform going to look like? We're going to continue to use Google Classroom as our hub and expand our work within it. It will be a standard format for Google Classroom. And this year we had some teachers using 4 classrooms for each of the different content areas, others using 1. Each teacher will have their own Google Classroom but all their classes will be within that one Google Classroom. And I'll show you what that means. There will be a topic for each subject area, and there will be a daily outline on the top. So let me show you what that might look like. I created a Mr. Nestoric classroom. This is where the classroom work would be. Up at the top, there would be an agenda with each day on it where the child can go and look at the daily agenda of what does that child have to accomplish in this day. So you'll have each of those will expand out and just have an outline. Then below, you can see each content area would have its topics. So a student in my class doesn't have to go between 4 or 5 different screens to see the content they need for the day. It would all be here in this one area. You can see here I opened up and gave a really rudimentary sample of what an agenda might look like. Reading, watch the video. Read the story page 44 through 49. Answer comprehension questions. And then it would have the same for phonics, spelling, writing, etc., so that they know everything. There's a checklist essentially there for what they need to do every day. Going back in this other slide, then under phonics, if there was a video for the phonics or for the reading, it would be showing up here underneath the phonics, and that's where the children will find all their different resources. Students should follow the sequence of the days, but they can work on any day. So example, you know that weekdays aren't as good for you. Saturdays and Sundays might be better. You can do Monday's work on Saturday. You check in, you show attendance for that day, and you work on Monday. But the students will need to go sequentially, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Work will be posted up on here. These agendas will be put up by midnight on Friday, and the work will be due the following Sunday. So it's about 10 days to have the 5 days of work completed. So the teachers will, in speaking to the teachers, we agreed that we'd get the work up on Friday, the agendas, all the support materials. You'll see the whole week at a glance, and then the following Sunday, it will be all due. And so families can pace themselves accordingly. We've identified what tools we're going to support, and these are tools that we're going to train the staff in and also the students in, and we'll have videos available for parents to understand what those different pieces are. Circled and highlighted down here, we've been using Zoom. We are going to move over to Google Meets next year if we need remote learning, because that way it will be seamless and it'll help with passwords and different pieces like that, and everything will be contained within the Google platform. And looking at Google Meets, it has a lot of the same potential as the Zoom. There's some feeling out there that it provides better security, but all in all, it keeps us all within the Google platform and will simplify some things in some ways. So that is our overall platform. What does the design look like? We already talked about the fact that remote learning would look like teacher presenting a lesson, students doing some independence work, some small group work with the teacher to make sure there's understanding there, and office hours to answer questions and provide answers to the children directly, and then making sure there's assessment pieces in, because we will have letter grades and grades in place for next year. All classes will be given, all assignments will be going in through Google Classroom. Feedback will be provided to the students via Google Classroom, but grades will be recorded into Sycamore. We need to keep Sycamore and have the grades in there so that we can have the long-term archiving we need and all our student records in one place. But everything will be going in and out through Google Classroom, but the grades will be going into Sycamore. Grades will be updated at least every 2 weeks, and letter grades and grading scales will be utilized as per the school policy. And there will be expectations given to students if they're given a writing assignment, rubrics, etc., will be provided to show students what mastery would look like. The other piece that we've been working on is we now have it where every single one of our resources, our primary curriculums, also we have access to the digital content for those curriculum. We spoke about it earlier this week. We are adopting a new reading series. It's now between 2 programs, Wonders and Into Writing. Both of those have great online components so that if a child's reading a story, Dorothy Goes to Kansas, in class, The next day, they could be working on it digitally at home if, God forbid, that was what was necessary. We can go between those two platforms, the digital and print, with ease. Same thing with the Saxon Math. I was on with a sales representative again this morning, and he's working on making sure that we have access to all the Saxon Math stuff. They have a digital platform, so the same work they would be doing in class, they can do digitally, and these different programs work seamlessly with Google Classroom. This week's studies, the Science and Social Studies, has a online component with it, and we also got in touch with our publisher of our religion program, RCL Benzinger, and they have given us the platforms for the digital side of things as well. So everything we have, all the major resources we have, the teachers are going to have the digital sides of them so that they can be automatically and seamlessly working with those resources. We've also identified a whole bunch of supplemental resources that our teachers can use. They're not limited to these, but we wanted to make sure that teachers knew what additional resources may be out there. So those are the design, values, framework, platform design, resources. I was hoping, and I wrote here, we have ordered, getting our final quote tomorrow. So we ordered either tomorrow or Tuesday. We've ordered for all teachers Chromebooks, document scanners / cameras. Thank you to the Catholic Foundation for their very generous grant to make that happen, and stylists so that the teachers can be working and have the equipment that they need at home. All the equipment they're using right now is their own stuff or things they've purchased on their own. They will have what they need so that they can move between the two different environments. The other pieces that we are, with this same order, we are ordering 130 Chromebooks, and that will be finalized tomorrow as well. Every student will have a Chromebook. It will be housed here at the school unless we know that there's going to be a need to send them home because of a remote learning situation. But every single student will have a school-issued Chromebook that they can use if there's a need for remote learning. That way our students all have the same tools. They all have access. We don't have students sharing laptops with each other or with their parents. Every student will have access to it and will be able to have the tools on the Chromebooks. That will bring us up to 197 Chromebooks within our school, which is more than enough for all our kids to have what they need here. And so I've been working with Father Dome, and he was very generous, and we are in a position where we're able to do that. And so that order is going out also tomorrow. We're also already planning staff development and training. So we've identified, I'm going to be taking the course here next week on a Google Classroom class to learn how to use it better. Assuming that goes well and it's valuable, we're going to roll that out to all our teachers. We've identified all the areas that teachers need immediate training in. We're putting together a needs assessment on that and then getting it out to them. We're also going to be making training modules that we'll have on a website for parents on different pieces on how to, Lisa already did a beautiful job creating some videos for us on Google Classroom, but we're going to expand that. We're also going to be developing a student boot camp to help them navigate the different pieces as well. To provide assistance to parents and students for remote learning, we're going to work with our webpage to have a landing page on our website so that it will have all the office hours on there, codes, etc., access to the Google Classroom so that you can go to this landing page and then get into the Google Classroom training videos, everything located in one place, whether that's on our Sycamore or on the website. We're working on the development of that side of things, and then continue to have dedicated support to the parents and to the students. Question was asked, how many students are in each class? I'll have to pull that up at the end. We have had a very good re-registration for next year. We're sitting at 169 students for next year. Most of the classes are at right about the same level they were this year. So if you think about the classes for this year, they're sitting at about the same for next year. The one exception for that is we had 2 first grade classes. We'll have 1 second grade class sitting at about 24 students. Depending upon what happens with that at the beginning of the year, we'll be looking at what options might be necessary if there's a dramatic change in that 24 for that first grade classroom. So we talked about the in-school learning and the preparations we're making for that, and that being our primary choice. We talked about remote learning and that we have a design ready to go with that. Then there's the hybrid. What if it's something in between? What if the governor says that we can only have 100 kids on the campus, or we can only have 50% or 25% of our population here at any time? What do we do and how do we look at it? Really, when we're looking out there, most people are saying that a hybrid might be needed if it's needed to ensure social distancing. If our classrooms aren't big enough, then we might have to have a hybrid model. Or we may be limited in the number of people we have in the building or classrooms. Or how do we protect those who are vulnerable within our populations? This is so abstract at this point in time. All we can do is come up with models that might work within these three different variables. There's a lot of different ones out there. The ones that are strongest, and not like in any of them, but the ones that are strongest that we could consider is an A-B schedule, where half the kids come to school one day, the other half comes the other day, and we flip-flop back and forth. On the days they're not in school, then those are days that they're on the remote learning. Half of the grades come one day at a time. First, third, fifth, seventh come on day 1A. The other grades come on day B, and they alternate back and forth. When they're not in the school, again, they're on remote learning. It may be that we need to do half days where half the students come in the morning, half of the students come in the afternoon. We may need to have some people, schools are putting out there, or we're looking at some research, I should say, is looking at if we only can have half of our kids here, do we do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule with half the kids, and then a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule with the other half of the kids? The other piece, and I read a really interesting article about this yesterday, talks about protecting vulnerable teachers and vulnerable students, is that we have an opt-out program within our school and an opt-in. Kids can opt out of in-school learning and opt into remote learning, and providing avenues for students that aren't comfortable in schools, coming in schools, or they have medical conditions that prohibit them from coming in school until there's a vaccine, or staff members that are a part of the vulnerable population, that provides that option. So none of these are good. We haven't settled on any of these. We probably will not know if we need a hybrid model closer to the middle of July, end of July, that time period, and then we can start looking at what we will do. None of these, I don't think we'll know anyway, in any way, of whether we're going to be in school, remote, or a hybrid until that time period of July or August, when there's more known about the virus. We see how the ramping up goes and the different pieces like that. Here's my bottom line, and this is the last slide, and I'll answer any questions and be around for a little bit to answer those questions. No matter what the world brings, we are now in the position that we can grow as a faith community. We can provide a rigorous formation, ensure safety, and demonstrate and provide flexibility. Our school is the long-term solution, and this is a short-term problem. And I couldn't be more thankful to the staff that we're working with, that have dedicated themselves to trying to figure out how do we do this. We have a pastor who's incredibly supportive and making sure that we have the resources and the support we need to be able to pivot whatever way we can go, but also make sure if we can be on campus, we're going to be on campus. So with that, I will go ahead and answer any questions people might have. Question was asked about if APS doesn't open, will OLA follow suit? No. So I was very careful. If we go back to the slide, let me go back to who decides. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. This slide here, the governor, we are not under the jurisdiction of Albuquerque School Board. We are not under the jurisdiction of the Public Education Department. We're under the jurisdiction of the governor and her executive orders that impact all populations, and we're under the jurisdiction of the Archbishop. And so those are the ones who will decide. So let me give you a scenario, and it's a really good question. Governor says buildings could be open and we can have 50% of the school people within all buildings. Public Education Department says we're not opening public schools. We can still open even if the Public Education Department says public schools are closed. Albuquerque says they're not prepared or we're doing this model. We have to follow what the governor says and what the Archbishop says. We don't have to follow what the school board or the superintendent decide in Albuquerque. So it goes back to we're going to be as aggressive as possible. I really believe it's healthy for schools to be open. I really don't see how we open society without the schools being open. And so we're going to do everything we can here at the school to be there, be ready to go, so that we can open our doors in a safe way as well. The current hybrid learning option appears to be making strong assumptions that the restrictions will allow up to half the students in school. The option should probably include where the restrictions, if any, may not allow up to half of the students. Is there valid considerations is this valid consideration, and can we plan for this possibility? Yes. So we can plan for a lot of different possibilities. These are all, I went with the 50%, but let's say it's 25%. Sorry. Let's say it's 30% or 25%. These are all frameworks that we will be able to work within and design things around. So let's even say if it's 25%, do we do 25% Monday, Wednesday, or even a better example, 30%? Do we do a third of the kids Monday, Wednesday, a third of them Tuesday, Tuesday, Friday, and a third of them Thursday, Saturday? And so there's different ways that we can look at it. We're going to be aggressive in whichever way of having kids on this campus as much as possible, as much as we're legally allowed to, and we'll be prepared to do it safely. Any additional questions, concerns, complaints? So the question was asked here, most middle schools, private and public, have Google Classroom for 6th through 8th grade in conjunction with in-class instruction. Prepares them for high school and beyond and aids in the organization. Would the school consider still using the platform if we're in school? Great question, and I neglected to put that in. We're going to be using the Google Classroom platform, whether we're in school or out of school. Individual that asked this question is exactly right. It provides organization and such. So plus our kids are going to need the familiarity. There's a very good, I shouldn't say there's a possibility that we open school and come January, they say we're going to have to be out of school. If that's the case and we're using Google Classroom all along, our second graders, our first graders, our sixth or eighth graders are going to be ready for that. And so our Google Classroom is going to be integrated within it. All our teachers are going to be trying to use, bringing Google Classroom into homework assignments and different pieces like that. Can you talk through additional staff changes beyond what was mentioned on Tuesday? I don't know of any additional, the only other additional staff changes, right now we have openings in art, English, halftime, finding a halftime teammate for Ms. Arguello so she can go back to halftime. And then we have a paraprofessional position open as well. That paraprofessional position I'm holding, looking at making it only halftime, so or not filling it, so that we can hire a maintenance person, additional maintenance person to be doing the cleaning on a nightly basis. The only other staff we're looking at is adding in a librarian at halftime. So we have that advertisement starting up for middle school English and religion, art, halftime librarian, halftime second grade teacher, and then I'm holding back money to look at that maintenance person instead of a paraprofessional. So we talked about that question. I'm sorry, they're scrolling, so I'm having to go back and look. Will a survey be considered for parents giving feedback on how they feel about students physically returning to school? Unless that, we will be aggressively opening with the parents, with the consent of the governor and the Archbishop. We will not be, I can't foresee us doing any kind of survey that says, do we want to reopen or not? We need to provide a school here. Now we can look at the option, if there's parents that aren't comfortable sending their child back, is there a way that we can provide the remote learning to them? And I need to see what our capacity is at that point in time. But I can also tell you, if we are able to open, we will be opening. And we will put the provisions in place to make sure that we can open safely. Can kids get 5 days a week by being on campus 2 and remote 3? Yeah, yes. So I think I'm understanding that question. So we are going to make sure that there's the 5 days of instruction going on. The question is whether they'll be on campus or off campus remotely. So if we're off campus and we have to do a model where they're only on campus 2 days a week, the other 3 days they'll have remote learning going on. And so we will be making sure that whatever hybrid, if we need to do a hybrid, whatever that would be, there will be remote learning on the days that they're not here on the campus. What will happen if or when students or staff members test positive for COVID? How do we protect those that the affected person have come into contact with? Will there be a self-quarantining period? That's the piece that I've been diving into for a month now at the principal level and chairing a committee. So if there is a COVID incident at a school, we will be following whatever the recommended guidelines are. And so it would most likely mean what schools that have had this happen, both in our nation and across the world, it would be meaning a self-quarantining period for anybody that came into contact with that child. If the child had contact within the school, we may have to close down for a period of time. We also have plans in place. What we worked on is what happens if someone's extremely sick, if unfortunately someone passes away. We have protocols in place with that. But if there is a positive COVID and there was the contact, the recommendation of the government is that anybody who came in contact with that person is quarantining. Some schools like Notre Dame University are opting not to have their fall breaks on other days so that you can close down longer during the flu season. Just sharing the information, but also just so that you know, this is something that the diocese is looking at the calendar and going to be looking at making some recommendations on that as part of the committee, the other committee that is doing their work. So we do have a calendar right now. The calendar has us opening up on the 17th of August. That's our planned start date. However, and we have just a traditional calendar like we've had in the past years. But if the diocese may choose to change the calendar. So we will be publishing this calendar as we have it right now. But please know that this may change with changing events in the world. All right, I think I answered all the questions. I hope I'll scroll through these very quickly to make sure I didn't. We are looking at a moving target, but we're preparing ourselves for that moving target in many different ways. So I really hope my goal tonight was to provide some reassurance that we are looking at these things, that we are putting the resources in place we need to be able to react. People have been asking, are we going to open if we can? The answer is yes. We are going to open if we can. We're going to look at that CDC chart and make sure that we have everything in place. But if we have everything in place and we're legally allowed to open, we will be opening, and then families can make their decisions from there. So I think I got everything. Again, enrollment is, if you take what your children's classes were like this year and move them up one level, all the classes right now, except for the 6th grade fifth grade going into sixth grade are right where they were at the end of when you left in March. Our fifth grade going into sixth grade is down. We've picked up 2 and we lost 5. So we're down 3 kids in the sixth grade class. And again, we're combining the first grade into 1 second grade classroom. So I think I covered everything. I'll be around if there's any additional questions. Oh, let me talk about First Communion. I had a phone call again with, and anybody's welcome to leave. You can stay or go. Let me just look at something real quick. So again, we hit about 50 participants a night. So thank you. I really appreciate you taking your time. For First Holy Communion and reconciliation and graduation, I met with Father. I spoke with him on the phone today. He asked me that he wanted to think about things tonight. He asked me to give him a call back tomorrow. I'll give you a heads up that those things may be happening fairly quickly. So there is an openness to having them take place. And I'll know better when I contact him at the end of the day of what he's thinking and using his judgment. He knows a lot of the rules that were put in place by the Archbishop and what we have to go by. So I know he's weighing all that very prudently. So I'm really hoping to have an answer to the 3rd grade and to the 8th grade in particular by Tuesday, no later. Question about Miss Wentworth. Miss Wentworth has decided to retire. I know it's been something she's been weighing all year long. She's going out on a very good note. She'll be back here substituting. I just have completely valued her presence here at the school. And so she's going to stay a presence at her school here. But she has decided that after, I think it's 35 years of teaching and close to 30 years here at the school, that it's time for her to retire. Statement was made, CDC guidelines are just that and not necessary to implement. Exactly. So we're using them as a guideline, as things to think about, but we're going to be making we are going to follow what the requirements are, but use the guidelines that help us prepare and use our judgment and apply those to our community here at the school. So I'll be around for another couple minutes. I'm not seeing any more questions, but I'll be around if anybody has any for me. All right, have a good night. I'm going to close up the room. Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate it.